On the 4th of August 36 combat clashes took place between Ukrainian defense forces and Russian occupiers. Source: General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook. Information is of 6 o'clock on the 5th of August. Quote, "Over the past 24 hours, the enemy launched a missile strike, 50 airstrikes and 86 attacks using multiple launch rocket systems. Unfortunately, Russian terrorist attacks have resulted in casualties among civilians, both dead and wounded. Residential houses and other civilian infrastructure facilities have been damaged. The likelihood of further missile and air strikes across Ukraine remains very high. A total of 36 combat clashes took place over the past day." Details: The situation on the Volyn and Polissia fronts remained unchanged. On the Severshchina and Slobozhanshchina fronts, the Russians carried out airstrikes near Volyn and Konstantinivka in Sumy Oblast. They launched mortar and artillery attacks on more than 25 settlements, in particular, Krinivka, Bleshnya and Yenjulivka, Chernihiv Oblast, Kazakh, Boyaro Lezachi and Kindrativka, Sumy Oblast, and Kazakha Lopan, Malavovcha, Ambarn and Balahivka, Kharkiv Oblast. On the Kupiansk front, the Russians carried out airstrikes near Shikivka, Kharkiv Oblast. 10 settlements came under Russian artillery and mortar fire, including Putniko, Fyholivka, Podoli and Kyslivka, Kharkiv Oblast. On the Lyman front, the Russian troops carried out airstrikes near Horohorivka and Serebryanka in Donetsk Oblast. They shelled 10 settlements, including Nevsky, Bilohorivka, Luhansk Oblast, and Torsky, Verkhnekamiansk, Berestov and Rozdalivka, Donetsk Oblast. On the Bakhmut front, the Ukrainian defense forces are holding back the Russian advance near Klashivka and Kurdyamivka. The Russians carried out airstrikes near Marko, Klashivka, Bila Hora and New York. They shelled more than 15 settlements, including Predtekine, Bila Hora, Pivnikny and New York, Donetsk Oblast. On the Avdiivka front, Ukrainian defenders successfully repelled Russian attacks near Avdiivka while under constant aircraft and artillery fire by the Russians. The Russians shelled 15 settlements, including Oleksandropol, Novobakhmutivka, Novokulinov, Severn and Nevelsky in Donetsk Oblast. On the Marinka front, the Ukrainian defense forces continue to hold back the offensive of Russian troops near Marinka, Staromykhailivka and Krasnohorivka. The Russians carried out airstrikes near Krasnohorivka. They also shelled over 10 settlements, including Krasnohorivka, Postray, Marinka, Pobeda, Novomykhailivka, Paraskoviivka and Katarinivka in Donetsk Oblast. On the Shakhtarsk front, the Russian troops made unsuccessful attempts to regain lost positions near Blahodatna. They launched airstrikes in and around Staromyhorsk. The Russians struck the settlements of Blahodatna, Vuhledar, Bowa-Avlenka, Prekostivka, Zolotaniva, Vlika Novosilka and Staromyhorsk, Donetsk Oblast, and Levadnet, Zaporizhia Oblast. On the Zaporizhia front, the Russian forces conducted unsuccessful offensive operations near Novopokrovka. They launched airstrikes near Mala-Tokhmichka, Orikhiv and Novodanilivka in Zaporizhia Oblast. The Russians are focusing their primary efforts on preventing the further advance of Ukrainian troops. More than 15 settlements came under Russian artillery fire, including Olhaivsky, Bilahiria, Mala-Tokhmichka, Novodorivka, Mali-Sherbeki and Kamiansk in Zaporizhia Oblast. On the Kherson front, the Russians carried out airstrikes near Odradokomayanka and Dachi. More than 25 settlements came under artillery fire, including Chervony Mayak, Antonivka, Dniprovsky, Stanislav and Kherson Oblast. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian defense forces are maintaining their offensive on the Melitopol and Berdyansk fronts, consolidating their positions and striking the Russians. The Ukrainian Air Force launched 9 airstrikes on clusters of Russian military personnel, weapons and equipment over the past 24 hours. Moreover, Ukrainian defenders also destroyed 2 Iranian-made Shahed 136 attack drones. Ukrainian rocket forces and artillery destroyed 9 artillery pieces at their firing positions and 2 clusters of Russian military personnel, weapons and equipment. AFU hold back enemy troops in Bakhmut sector, repel attack near Avdiivka. 30 military clashes have occurred between Ukraine's defense forces and Russian troops over the past day. The relevant statement was made by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook, and Ukrinform correspondent reports. In the past 24 hours, Russian invaders have launched 39 airstrikes, used 2 Shahed 136 131st loitering munitions, both of which were destroyed, and opened fire with multiple launch rocket systems MLRS 43 times. Following Russian terrorist attacks, casualties among civilians were reported, as well as the damage caused to residential houses and other civil infrastructure. The threat of Russian missile and air strikes is persisting all over Ukraine, according to the General Staff. In the Volyn and Polissia directions, the operational situation remained rather unchanged. In the Siversky and Slobozhansky directions, Russian troops launched airstrikes near the Sumy regions Volyn and Konstantinivka. Over 25 settlements were affected by Russian mortar and artillery strikes in the Chernihiv, Sumy and Kharkiv regions. In the Kupiansk direction, over 10 settlements were affected by Russian artillery and mortar strikes. In the Lyman direction, Russian occupiers shelled the Luhansk regions Nevsky and Bilohorivka, and the Donetsk regions Torsky, Verkhnyokamyansk, Spern and Rozdalivka. In the Bakhmut direction, Ukraine's defense forces are holding the enemy back near Klashivka and Kurdyamivka. Over 10 settlements were affected by Russian artillery strikes. In the Avdiivka direction, under extensive artillery fire and air strikes, Ukrainian warriors successfully repelled Russian attacks near the Donetsk region's Avdiivka. Over 15 settlements were affected by enemy artillery strikes. In the Marinka direction, Ukrainian forces continue holding back Russia's onslaught near Marinka and Krasnohorivka. The enemy shelled over 10 settlements. In the Shakhtarsk direction, Russian troops made unsuccessful attempts to regain their lost positions near Blahodatna. Russian artillery strikes affected the Donetsk regions Blahodatna, Vuhledar, Bowa-Avlenka, Prekostivka, Zolotaniva, Vlika Novosilka, and the Zaporizhia regions Staromyorsk and Levantna. In the Zaporizhia direction, Russian occupiers conducted unsuccessful offensive actions near Novopokrovka. The enemy launched air strikes near the Zaporizhia regions Malotokmichka, Orikhiv and Novodanilivka. Russian invaders are focusing efforts to prevent Ukrainian forces from advancing. Over 15 settlements were affected by enemy artillery strikes. In the Kherson direction, Russians launched an air strike near Odradokamayanka. Over 20 settlements were affected by enemy artillery strikes. Meanwhile, Ukraine's defense forces continue the offensive operation in the Melitopol and Berdyansk directions, are gaining a foothold within the recaptured frontiers and carrying out counter-battery measures. The enemy continues to conceal their losses, namely through the use of mobile crematoriums. One of such crematoriums is now operating around the clock in the northeastern part of the Zaporizhia region's temporarily occupied city of Melitopol. Local residents are complaining of the constant smell of corpses in the city, especially at night. Over the past day, Ukraine's Air Force has launched 7 strikes on enemy personnel, ammunition and military equipment clusters. Ukrainian missile and artillery units hit 9 Russian artillery systems in firing position, in 2 personnel, ammunition and military equipment cluster. The General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces reported on August 5 that Russia had lost 249,110 troops in Ukraine since the beginning of its full-scale invasion on February 24 last year. This number includes 620 casualties Russian forces suffered just over the past day.